What's going on, everybody? Mr. Octagonal here, talking all things franchise mode here on MLB The Show 20. Gonna be giving my opinion on the mode, and then, of course, the main portion of this video being that you guys will have the opportunity to vote for the team that I use in my MLB The Show 20 franchise. Most of this video will be me explaining the case for each team. So what's different about the game mode this year? And I think the big things for me are certainly full minors rosters. A lot of the minor league players have face scans, including this one for Alec Bohm. Looks super clean, and for pretty much all the top prospects, they do have good-looking face scans, and we won't have to wait a few weeks until the full minors rosters are out. We can fully start our franchises right away and get into them. And then the second thing is relocation and rebranding, the big thing added in franchise mode. And how will I be implementing that into my series? Well, I do not plan on relocating, and I'm not the best at making uniforms in MLB The Show. I may consider doing a rebrand down the line, but for right now, we're not going to really worry about that until maybe later in the series. So now we got to focus on what I'm going to be doing for my series. I've picked 5 teams that I think would be fun for franchise, and I think these are 5 really good options. Usually there's 1 or 2 teams that I'm leaning on, but this time I'm cool with all 5. I'm probably going to do whoever wins the poll. The first team I'm considering using for my franchise this year is the Oakland Athletics. And this is a surprise team because normally I choose to rebuild really bad teams who need to contend. But the A's are not bad at all. This is a team that has a legitimate shot of contending, and they're a threat to go far in the postseason this year. So you're probably wondering, why would I consider the A's, who are already really good, and a gigantic threat to win 100-plus games this year? Well, as I want to do this year in franchise, I want to focus on longevity. Last year, my Diamondbacks franchise, it only lasted 3 years, and it was 3 really fun seasons. I really enjoyed building up that team, but I want to put more of a focus on developing the prospects and getting these young prospects who we're looking at in these minor league updates in the major leagues and starring for our teams. So that's what I want to put more of a focus on, and the thing with the A's is, can we keep them good for a while? Because the thing with the A's is they don't have the largest of budgets. I assume we've all heard of Moneyball, the famous film, where it basically shows what it's like running the Oakland A's. I've never watched the movie, so I can't really fully speak on it. But the A's are a team that does not have the most resources to really go out and get a bunch of superstars. But they've gone in-house and developed a bunch of really talented players like Matt Chapman, Marcus Semien, Matt Olson, Ramon Laureano, and even more young guys coming up like Jesus Luzardo, AJ Puck, and Jorge Mateo. These are all going to be the faces of that franchise, and I think keeping this A's team good for a while will be a challenge because eventually guys like Matt Olson and Semien and Chapman, their contracts are going to be up. They're going to want to be in a big market city or get the most possible money they can, which are 2 things that the A's don't really have. So I think keeping this team good for a while and keeping them as contenders would be more of a challenge rather than rebuilding their core. So certainly a different type of franchise, but I do think the A's really fit the mold of the type of team that I would look for MLB The Show 20. And not to mention, I went through some of those names just a second ago. This is a super fun roster, and we would have fun, and we'd be winning games right off the jump. So if you want to see winning, hopefully, throughout the entire cycle of MLB The Show 20, the Oakland A's are probably the team for you. The second team I'm going to be considering is the Milwaukee Brewers. Yes, another playoff team. So already, the first 2 teams I'm looking at are coming off postseason appearances, which I know a lot of you find weird. But the Brewers are very different to the Oakland Athletics because the Brewers got a lot worse this offseason. First of all, they also got new jerseys. So these would be the uniforms that we'd be rocking with, and I think it would be fun having a new set of uniforms. But I mean, if you look at the Brewers, they got noticeably worse this offseason, losing all-stars and Yasmani Grandal, the catcher, probably the best hitting catcher in all of baseball, who signed with the White Sox, and then third baseman Mike Moustakas, who signed in division to go to the Cincinnati Reds, who have become a new threat in the NL Central. And I think the Brewers, talent-wise, are probably the 4th best team in that division, so I don't think we're choosing a contender by any means in the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't think this is going to be a playoff team next year unlike the Oakland Athletics. And the Brewers have a few very intriguing pieces, including Christian Yelich, who, in my opinion, is the second best player in baseball behind Mike Trout. So off the jump, we are getting an absolute superstar in Christian Yelich, a 5-tool player who can do it all, and we would have an immediate building block for the future. And if we struggle, like I predict early on in the series, I think that could shake up some drama. Does Christian Yelich want to be a Brewer long term? That could open up a trade opportunity for Christian Yelich. I know a lot of you are cringing hearing that, but I think that would be an interesting concept. Who knows what we get back in return for him? Probably a king's ransom. And he's not going to be under contract forever. So I think having that storyline on potentially keeping Yelich for the long haul or moving on from him if things don't work out for either sides, I think that would create a really interesting dynamic. Also to mention, they have some really fun pieces, most notably Keston Hiura, the second baseman. That guy is an absolute stud. He'd be a phenomenal building block for this team, who definitely would not be any trade rumors, and we would try to develop him to become one of the best infielders in all of baseball. But after that, the Brewers don't have a ton of pieces. I mean, they still have a decent amount of talent returning from last year. They have some new interesting pickups, such as Luis Urias. They got in a trade with the Padres this past offseason. Urias has a ton of potential, and him and Hiura could be a force in the middle infield for really this entire series, if we're being honest. But outside of that, the Brewers, they've never bothered to develop pitching in the recent future, and they don't have a lot of great prospects in their minor leagues. I was going through their rosters. I think the only player in the minors who has an A potential is Orlando Arcia. And Arcia has been in the major league since 2016. They just had him in the minors because he's been such a disappointment so far with the Brewers. So we would have to do a ton of rebuilding. And, I mean, this would be a team where if we're contending year one, which there's a chance, hey, maybe we go out and pick up some pieces at the deadline. But if I'm being honest, I think it's more realistic that we were to go sell off some guys. Maybe not Yelich right away, but some other players like Avisail Garcia, Omar Narvaez, Brandon Woodruff. These are guys who could all get as really good prospects, which is what I think this team needs. I don't think the Brewers, even with a guy in Christian Yelich who's a generational, I don't know if I'd say generational player, but he's the second best player in the league right now. And then Keston Hiura, who has so much potential to become a superstar, but the Brewers don't have a lot after that. So I think that would create an interesting dynamic of what do we do season one. And then after that, how are the decisions from season one going to impact us for the rest of the series? So I think that'd be a really interesting idea. And obviously, to go with the uniforms, I think that's why the Brewers would be a really intriguing option for a franchise this year. The third team we're looking at is not an organization who's made the playoffs recently at all. And that's the Miami Marlins. The Marlins have been a mess for a long time. And really, ever since that World Series they got, actually 2 World Series early in their existence, they looked like they were going to be a prominent franchise. In this past decade, yeah, it's been a really rough decade for the Miami Marlins. We'll just leave it at that. And this is what you call a poverty franchise. I mean, they have not gotten any real pieces in a while, and their ownership is a mess. Derek Jeter, sorry, bud, but you've done an awful job since taking over this team. And we would try to not only fix Jeter's mistakes, but fix all the mistakes that were made even before Derek Jeter took possession of this team. Marlins have been bad. They've just been flat out bad. They don't have many pieces on the major league roster. There are a few good ones. Jorge Alfaro, Brian Anderson, and I guess Isan Diaz. He's a very good prospect. I think he's going to really get some major time starting this season, so I guess he counts. But outside of that, I mean, you'd think the Marlins would start to be getting more talent in the majors now. I mean, just 2 years ago, they had JT Realmuto, D. Gordon, Giancarlo Stanton, Christian Yelich, Marcell Ozuna. They traded all of those guys within a span of a year, 4 of them in one offseason, and then Realmuto the following offseason, and they got practically nothing in return. Yeah, they got a few decent prospects. They got Jorge Alfaro in the Realmuto trade, but I mean, still, let's look at the best player of that group, Christian Yelich. You want to know what they got back for him? Lewis Brinson. Lewis Brinson sucks. He has not just been a disappointment. He's been probably one of the worst players in the majors since he was called up. He's been absolutely terrible for the Marlins. and they traded the second best player in baseball for him. That just shows you how much of a joke this team is. Now, to be fair, they do have a lot of really enticing pieces in the minors. Sixto Sanchez, Victor Mesa, Braxton Garrett, just to name a few. I know there are probably about 7 or 8 potential guys in their minor league system when I was looking through their roster today. So unlike the Brewers, and even unlike the A's in a way, this team has a ton of talent in the minors already. And also, their minor league team names are sick. The Jumbo Shrimp and the Baby Cakes, sign me up for that. Hell yes. But the Marlins, this is a team that's not going to be good early on. The A's are going to be good. The Brewers could be good. The Marlins are not. There are 14 good/decent teams in the National League, and then there are the Miami Marlins. And it would take a while for this team to get good, but I think by season 3, by season 4, we start to build a better team, and then towards the end, I think we have the chance to make the Marlins a contender if we can actually develop these minor league talents correctly, unlike what the team has been able to do this past decade. So I think this will really be rejuvenating a once franchise that looked promising and has just gone in the dumpster for 10 to 15 years. And I think the Marlins will be a really fun project. The next team we're looking at, believe it or not, is even worse than the Miami Marlins. That's right, probably the worst team in baseball on paper by a country mile, the Baltimore Orioles. The Orioles have really gone full-on tank mode these past couple years. Throughout the 2010s, they had a few good teams. They had some very talented players, MVP Chris Davis, who they held on to for way too long, a young, talented Manny Machado. They've also had Adam Jones for most of his prime. Mark Trumbo had a few good years. For the past couple of seasons, the Orioles have been hot garbage. And this would be the Miami Marlins, but on steroids. Now, the difference about the Orioles is the Orioles are a better organization. They have a better feel of what they're doing, and I think they're in a more sense of direction. They don't have a lot of talent on their major league roster. MLB The Show has their best player is Jose Iglesias, which is a joke. And they also have guys like Trey Mancini, DJ Stewart, Renato Nunez on the major league team. Those guys are all interesting pieces, but for a team like the Dodgers, none of those guys will be starters, and they are the stars on the Orioles. So this is a team that would realistically win about 55 games year one. But there are a few interesting prospects in the minor league system. Grayson Rodriguez, starting pitcher. Ryan Mountcastle, a talented third baseman. And then the big name, Adley Rutschman. Rutschman has been number 1 overall pick in the 2019 draft out of Oregon State. He is a catcher and has drawn a lot of comparisons to a guy like Buster Posey. So this could be our Buster Posey, and maybe we can sort of have a good few seasons like the San Francisco Giants did in the early 2010s and become a dynasty. This team needs a ton of work. We don't have many tradable pieces unless we were to give up guys like DJ Stewart and Trey Mancini. And outside of those few prospects I've named, the Orioles don't have a stacked farm system. They do have some draft capital, and maybe we can find a few hidden gems here and there. But the Orioles would probably be the most challenging team of the group to do. You could make a case for the Marlins, but the Orioles have far less talent in their farm system, not to mention with the Yankees in the division, and if the Red Sox can get better, and the Rays are a really good team, and oh yeah, the Blue Jays have a phenomenal trio of Vladimir Guerrero, Calvin Biggio, and Bo Bichette. So that's a really tough but yet fun division for us to play in. And competing with teams like the Yankees and the Blue Jays and even the Red Sox and the Rays towards the end of this series, I think we could turn this division into an absolute dogfight, and having the Orioles would be really, really interesting, and I think they'd be really, really fun as well. The fifth and final team I have put on the poll is the Pittsburgh Pirates. I did not get a graphic of the manager and the logo transitioning into the roster, but whatever. We'll make do with what we have. The Pittsburgh Pirates are a really interesting team for a few reasons. And, I mean, for starters, as I mentioned with the Marlins, they're in a really talented National League conference. And then with the Brewers, that's a really tough division, as I mentioned. I said the Brewers were the 4th best team in that division because the Reds, the Cubs, and the Cardinals all have legitimate playoff aspirations. I think the Cardinals, and maybe even the Reds, might be contenders to go to the World Series. I don't know about the Cubs. The Cubs aren't as good this year. But what about the Pittsburgh Pirates? They have been mediocre for a long, long time, and They have a disgustingly badly ran organization. I mean, the front office is a joke. Their team was full of thugs last year. They were fighting everybody they could. Felipe Vasquez, their all-star closer last year, is a child molester. So, as you can tell, the Pirates, they have no sense of direction other than below-average mediocrity. This is not a super bad team, but it's far from a good team, and the way they're ran is a joke. But they do have some interesting pieces. Josh Bell, he was putting up MVP numbers the first half of last season. He'd be a really fun guy to have. Brian Reynolds, super underrated rookie. Brian Reynolds has the chance to be a superstar. And there are some other interesting bats on this team. Guys like Kevin Newman, Adam Frazier, Gregory Polanco even. There are some guys in this lineup who we could really develop. And then the pitching rotation as well. Jameson Taillon is playing like an all-star. And the guys below him, Joe Musgrove, Trevor Williams. There is some legitimate talent. Even Chris Archer, who they gave 2 young all-stars away for. Let me go back to the Pirates being terribly ran. In the 2018 trade deadline, they got Chris Archer, a below-average starter now, for Austin Meadows, who is an all-star outfielder, Tyler Glasnow, who's an all-star pitcher for the Rays. So, back to the point, the Pirates have some interesting pieces. They have some interesting trade pieces. I think Gregory Polanco is a perfect example of a guy who we could look to move at the deadline, and then some guys who we might want to build around long-term, like Brian Reynolds, like Josh Bell, like, what's-his-face, Jameson Taillon. And even guys like Taillon and Bell could be trade pieces down the line if things don't work out. So I think the Pirates could be a really interesting team, and they seem like the type of team that I would do. They seem like the traditional octagonal franchise team. I'm not saying the Pirates are my top choice. I don't really have a top choice this year for teams. Last year, I was kind of leaning towards the Diamondbacks. I wanted to see the vote, and it seems like a decent amount of people did want to see the Diamondbacks, so that was my confirmation. This year, I don't have a set team. I would say I'd be really happy to do any one of these teams. I think the A's, the Brewers, the Marlins, the Orioles, and the Pirates are all really, really fun options for my MLB The Show 20 squad. That'll do it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And most importantly, make sure to vote in the straw poll in the link and in the comments. Also, by the way, we're about 3 or 4 subs away from 2,000. We're probably going to hit that within the next 24 hours. So I thank you for all the support. And as the great Craniac Gaming says, let's keep this mofo rolling.